Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to show you my round 7 game from the Sesvete Open in which I faced Milan Jocev, my other former coach whom I faced this tournament. So there's a couple of funny stories connected to this game. First of all, Milan was staying with me in my apartment. So when we got paired, you have 24 hours you're going to spend with the person you're facing in a game the next day, which is uncomfortable to say the least, at least for me, because you have to prepare, you have to decide what to do. You're sort of enemies for the next 24 hours. And I had no idea what I was going to do against him. I know Milan pretty well, he knows me pretty well, we know each other's repertoires, and I'd decided that I wanted something aggressive, I wanted something sharp. I had a good tournament thus far, or up until this game. I had a plus score and everything was going pretty well. I should also mention that, I would like to apologize for not recording for a while, but I was playing chess and my teammates and I had a pretty good result recently. So we will be playing a very important tournament starting tomorrow or the next day, and I'll tell you all about it in the following videos, but it's been pretty exciting. In any case, this is a game full of complications and full of tactics, and I mean, it took me hours to understand what was going on during analysis, so it's not going to be easy to understand. In any case, I played e4. He played the Sicilian, which was slightly surprising, but not too surprising. Usually he will play either e5, or the Caro-Kann, or in e5 he will either play the main lines or the Petrov, so there were many options. I played knight f3, he played knight c6, and I chose the Rossolimo. He played e6, and I took the knight, which is common. He took with the b-pawn, I castled, and here he surprised me with f6. Now f6 is a strange move. This has been played maybe 20 times or so. It's far more common to play knight e7 or even d5 or even d6. You can also play queen c7. Most of those moves are either normal developing moves or preventing the advance of the e-pawn, which f6 also does, but it compromises black's king safety, obviously. And if you look at black's moves, black has been moving pawns and white has already castled. So I played d3, and I want to open up my bishop and have a normal game. And he played d6. And here I was completely confused. And I had to think, and I couldn't figure out why knight h4 doesn't work. It seemed to just win a clean tempo. So I'm threatening queen h5. And of course he doesn't have... So I did go knight h4. I'm threatening queen h5, and if he goes g6, I can just take it. If he doesn't go g6, then the king is misplaced. So he played g6 here, and I mean, I remember a Croatian IM, Nenad Doric, was playing on the board next to ours, and he was looking at our game pretty confused, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. Neither could I, and it turns out neither could Milan, because this wasn't his prep. He just saw that f6 can be played and then decided to, play. Now, after knight h4, I offered the draw, which I'm not proud to say, but I did, because I thought I had a better position, which is true, and I desperately wanted to go home, which is something I don't want to discuss here, but I had something. Okay, so he played g6, and I played f4, which is the whole idea behind knight h4. Of course, he prevents queen h5, but I can just get my knight back to f3 and have a good attacking position, maybe preparing f5 or e5. If you can hear some noises, there are some people in the garden of my building doing things. I don't know what, but they seem to be mowing the lawn or cutting the shrubberies. Anyway, bishop g7. And here I made a mistake. I should have gone knight c3. And on knight c3, black plays f5, which isn't something I was willing to allow. And I was afraid that after knight f3 and knight h6, he would get the g4 square and also have the idea of going back to f7 And I was planning to go e5 here, and I wasn't sure how to assess this position. Now, the engine says this is better for me. Of course, if this is taken, he has a completely ruined pawn structure. And if the pawn advances, then it's not really clear how this bishop is ever going to be good. So this was the way to go. Instead, I played f5, which equalizes the game, basically. He played knight e7, which is correct. I played knight c3, and I'm not afraid of him taking, of course. If he takes, he should be losing, I want to say. Like, if he takes here, then the e file is open, and if he takes with the g pawn, then the g file is open. The king is never going to have any sort of safety, so he just castled. Okay, and it should be about equal. So I took fg6, which is correct, hg6, and queen g4. I mean, why not? I'm putting pressure on the g6 pawn. Still, this is the only piece that's inactive, and I thought I had a good position. So queen e8 defending, queen g3. I wanted to avoid d5 from, you know, being a tempo move. E5, sorry, and he did play e5 anyway. He was gonna do it with the queen on g4, but at least this way I don't lose a tempo. Okay, I have to develop, so bishop d2. King h7, which is his first pretty serious mistake out of the opening. Now in this position the engine says +1 almost for white, and I played the correct move, rook f2. Not that it's too connected to king h7, but it's getting my last piece into play. Bishop e6, rook af1, again correct, and here he played c4. So as you know, I've started using Chessbook to actually work on a whole new repertoire. I've been using the English. I started in the last video, and I'm going to be doing it throughout the next 10 or so to see how it's going. I created a new account on Lichess just for this. My username is HPYBooker, and I played a couple of games so far. Yesterday I had a crushing loss in the symmetrical English. So basically what I'm doing is I'm playing c4 in every single white game, and I want to see how it goes. So if you haven't seen my videos on Chessbook before, Chessbook allows you to build your repertoire and work on it in the most efficient way I've ever seen. So you can import your repertoire either by hand or by importing a PGN, which is extremely useful to me, because let's say I create a Lichess study on the symmetrical English, I just import it and that's it. Other than that, it allows you to practice the moves in your repertoire, which is great. You can go through model games, and there are 300,000 model games. They just added new ones. They also increased or improved loading times, and there are two main features which I enjoy the most. One of them is working on the biggest gap in your opening. So if you click on your white repertoire, it's going to give you the option to go to your biggest gap immediately. So at this point, I haven't imported c4 knight f6 yet. So this is the biggest gap according to Chessbook in my repertoire. So you can do that. And as you import the basics, the gaps are going to become less and less obvious and more subtle. And you're actually going to be working on what you could encounter in your games. But the other option I enjoy is connecting your Lichess or chess.com accounts. In this case, I connected the Lichess accounts, and then correcting the mistakes from your games. And thus far, I've used my main account on which I've played every single opening, but now I've only played the English. So now I actually have 2 opening mistakes, and I don't know what they are. And let's see. So yeah, I remember this game. So where is this game? I think it's this one. Yeah, it's this game. So my opponent played c6, which was extremely confusing for me, and I responded with knight c3, but I imported e4 as my move in this position. So e4, and when they go d5, this was my plan. You take it once and you continue with e5. Okay, and then, okay, yeah, those are my opening mistakes. So what you can do is you can import your repertoire, and Chessbook is going to tell you which mistakes you've made, and you can do your best to correct them. And as you import several different repertoires, which you can do, you can have 10 different repertoires. You can see your performance by opening. Now for me, I've only played a couple of games so far, but before each video I record, I'm gonna play a few and hopefully get the white pieces in some of them, and then build up my English repertoire. Now as black, I've been playing my usual stuff, so maybe I should import the Caro-Kann and the Semislav and have it as black here, just to work on my black repertoire as well, but I will see. In any case, check out Chessbook. They are amazing, and I thank them for sponsoring the video. If you would like to check them out, there's a link in the description, chessbook.com/hanging-pawns. Check them out, and thank you. Let's go back to my game against Milan. Now, at this point, I was confused, and I wasn't sure how much counterplay I should allow on the queen side, and I didn't know just how strong my attack was. So there are ideas of playing knight f5 constantly. If this bishop should move away, there's queen h3. And I was also sort of looking at rook f5 ideas, but I don't think they worked. I wanted to get this knight into play, and I wanted to do something like king h1, knight e2, knight g1, knight h3, followed by knight g5, or knight f4. So I played knight e2, which isn't good according to the engine. The engine wants to go d4, which I didn't even consider, and of course after e d4, then the engine plays knight e2, and black plays c5. So what's the difference? The difference is that I can take on d6. I didn't think about the d6 pawn as something I could ever take or weaken, or something that I wanted to take. So the point is, you play d4, you take the d6 pawn, and white should have an advantage. In any case, I played knight e2. I didn't see that. He played queen b8, putting pressure on b2, and now again d4 was the correct way to play, even though d6 is defended. So he takes queen b2, I go bishop c1, and if queen c2, then d5. And on d5, there's bishop a3, and this is the engine line that's completely winning for white. The point is, you undermine the defense of g6. There is nothing black can do in this position. If queen e4, then bishop e7 wins a piece, and if rook f8, then again bishop e7, rook e7, queen g6 check, and the game is basically over. Black has to resign. This is like +10, or the engine announces mate. So that was the idea: get the bishop to a3 with tempo, weaken the defense of g6. Needless to say, I haven't even considered that. With the pawn on b2 and the pawn on d6, who could ever think of this capture? Bishop takes e7. So I played bishop c1. Okay, cd3, cd3, and he took the pawn on a2. Now I was aware that I was sacrificing a pawn, but I was sure that queen h3 would give me more than sufficient compensation, and that's true. White is better. He has to go king g8. I went to g4, which is absolutely correct. And now knight f5 becomes way stronger. He played bishop e6. And now my calculation of knight f5 was as follows. I didn't play it. I played king h1, which takes the game from a huge advantage for white to equal. So I thought, okay, knight f5, gf5, gf5, he plays bishop d7. Okay, and I go rook g2. I saw this. And I thought, okay, what do I do now? How do I increase the pressure? It's going to take me a while to get my other rook to g1. And if I go bishop h6, he can just go queen f8. So what's the point? Okay, so let's say king h1. And how do I continue? Well, I can actually take things pretty slowly. I mean, the only thing I have to worry about is this bishop coming to the diagonal and pinning my rook to the king. And this is what I'd considered during analysis. So I got this far during the game, and I couldn't see why I'd be better or equal even here. I mean, it just seemed that black is fine. Now looking at the position on the board, you can see that black cannot move anything. So it's winning for white. I'm not good enough, or I wasn't good enough to assess that position correctly. So if he, let's say, plays c5, then knight c3, let's say rook b8, rook f to g1, the engine says knight f5, and the idea behind knight f5 is, of course, bishop c6. So takes, bishop c6. And now the point of knight c3 is that I have knight e4, and black is completely losing. So yeah, on bishop e6, I did have knight f5. And usually, I will just miss stuff like this. But in this game, I was constantly looking at knight f5, and then ended up playing it at the sort of wrong moment later on. Okay, so I played king h1 instead. He played rook f7, and now I was looking at rook g1, and I was looking at knight g3. Now, if I go knight g3, he goes queen b5, putting pressure on the d3 pawn, and I jump into f5 again. So gf5, gf5, he moves the bishop somewhere, in this case, let's say to b3, and I go knight h5. Pretty similar idea, but after bishop h8, rook g1 check, king f8, I can just go knight f4. And if he goes bishop to g7, I go knight e6 check, and I'm winning. So he goes to e8, and I just take the bishop. I didn't see all of this. I saw some of it, but again, I couldn't see what happens when I take and he takes my knight, and I assumed that that would be something close to equal. I mean, it's very hard to figure out positions like these for me where everything is hanging, but yeah, I ended up playing rook g1 instead. Although I was considering this, and I was again considering knight f5. He played king f8, which is correct, getting out of all the pins. I played rook f g2. He played king e8, and now I played knight f5. And now black is winning after knight f5 because the king is sort of safe. He didn't take the knight, and I thought at this point, if he moves the bishop away, I take on g7, but he can just take on f5 and follow that up with bishop d5, and I resign. It's just completely losing. My rook is pinned. I'm never getting this bishop, and black has the bishop pair and a pawn in a completely dominant position. The king is safe on e7. But on knight f5, he played bishop f8, which isn't correct. He should have taken. I saved my knight, knight e3. He went d5, and I went rook f2. Now I want to put pressure on f6. Queen b5, putting pressure on the d3 pawn. So knight g2, d4, d4, and black is better now, even though black didn't take the knight, but Milan lost all his advantage by playing f5, and now white is very close to winning. This is, I mean, it's a very hard game to understand. So f5 is a blunder because it opens up all the lines towards his king. I took on f5, which is correct, and after gf5, I played knight c3, which is correct. He has to save the queen, so queen b3, and now queen h5. And at this point, Milan played the losing move. So you can pause the video here and figure out what you would do with black. It's a pretty hard position to understand. Whatever you do, white is better, significantly, but you should go king d7. And this seems pretty suicidal. It seems insane, but king d7 was the way to go. Instead, he played f4. And if you want, you can find the winning idea for white here. So the rook is pinned. All of my pieces look good, except for the bishop on c1. And there's a very simple winning idea here. And there's nothing black can do about it. I didn't see it. I played queen takes e5, which takes the position from +4 for white to equal. And here's the winning idea. The winning idea is knight h4. Now this may seem strange because all the squares are covered, so I haven't even considered knight h4. But let's say black plays rook d8. This is the engine move. I don't know what to suggest for black. Then you go knight f3. And then you can see that when I play knight g5, that's going to be the end of the game. So the engine plays rook d3. If king d7, then knight e5 check picks up the rook, so that doesn't work. So let's do the engine move. And now I go knight g5. And again, I don't know what to suggest. Let's do the engine move. King d7, knight f7, bishop f7, queen e5. Same position that we got in the game, but I'm the exchange up. And this is completely busted because everything is hanging for black. The bishop's hanging at the end of the line if I take on f4. Instead, I played queen e5, equal all zeros. Bishop g7, and I saw all of this. It took a ton of calculation, but I saw that I could get away with this. Queen c5, rook d8. Okay, and in this position, I should have gone queen h5 again. I should have gone queen h5. And when he plays bishop d4, then I go rook d2. And of course, if he takes on g1, then this is over because I have rook d8, rook f8. Okay, so that doesn't work. So he takes on c3. And now I take on d8, king takes d8, bc3, f3, and knight f4, and it should be equal, which is understandable. It seems kind of equal. I mean, the material is equal, and the bishop is hanging, or not hanging, but if the queen moves, it's hanging. And this pawn really isn't that scary. Instead, I played rook d2, which is a blunder. And he takes. I lose a piece. I was aware. Okay, let me close the window. This is crazy. Sorry. I don't know what's going on in my garden, but okay. Okay, so rook d2. White is losing a piece, almost by force. So rook takes d2. Bishop takes d2, queen b2, and two pieces hanging, no way to avoid losing one. However, knight takes f4, and now if rook takes f4, then everything is hanging. So he takes on d2, I take on e6, and he takes on c3. Okay, now black is a piece up, but I was correct in assuming that this was good for white, in the sense that I can at least have a perpetual check. So I took on a7, which is okay. He played queen f2, which is not okay. He had better moves, but it's a pretty human move, offering a queen trade. And the easiest draw here, I mean, this is an excellent exercise in tactics, so if you want to find the draw, you can find it. Obviously, you're trying to draw at this point because you're a piece down. The easiest draw was queen b8 check, and after king d7, rook d1 check. If bishop d2, this is game over because of rook d2, queen d2, knight c5 checkmate. Okay, I saw this. I was hoping he was gonna do this, but then, of course, I looked at queen b8, but I saw this position, knight d5, and I had no idea what to do here. If I take the knight, I'm just getting destroyed because one check and the game is over. So I cannot take the knight. If I take the knight, then queen f3. So I had no idea what to do here. I don't know. So the engine says queen c7 check. King takes e6. E takes d5. C takes d5, draw. I take on c3 and it's a draw. I just couldn't visualize that I'm not getting mated, and I didn't want to go for that. It seemed to me that queen f3 was going to be hanging at the end of all of these lines, but yeah, in the end I take the bishop on c3. And I was also worried about, well, what if he doesn't take? What if he just moves the king away? Well, if king, let's say f5, then I have queen f7 check, and that's the only square for the king. So unfortunately, I wasn't good enough to see all of that. So I played knight c7 check. Now, on knight c7, there are many ways for him to lose. For example, if he plays king to f8, then I go queen check, and he resigns. Knight c8 is the only move. If okay, king d7 is the alternative. So king d7. And if I go rook d1 check, which I didn't do, then he goes king c8 and he is perfectly safe. I can take on f2 and exchange queens, and that's the best I can get. So I played queen b7, threatening a discovery without a queen trade. Okay. He played queen f3 check. I played rook g2, which is the only move. He played queen d1 check. I played rook g1, queen f3 check, rook g2, and queen e4. The blunder. So he was completely winning at this point. He should have just gone rook g7, and I don't have anything. I mean, it's hard to see that I don't have anything, but he was low on time, so I'm guessing he was stressed out. But yeah, if I go, let's say, knight e6, then king e6, and I'm losing. If I go knight a6, then king e8, and I'm losing. This is the only check, king f7, and that's the end. I have queen b3, but after king f6, what am I going to do? e5. So yeah, completely losing. But when he played queen e4, I had a draw. And in this position, I played knight b5 check, which is mate in 9, which is insanely bad. He played king e6, and I went knight c7 and resigned 2 moves later. So king e5, queen a7, and he played rook f2, and that was the... Wait, did he go rook f2? Whoa, I think he went rook f2. Is that true? Because if he went rook f2, I can just take it. Let me go grab the score sheet. This is weird. Yeah, he did go rook f2. Ah, yeah, sorry, my queen was on a6, not on a7. Yeah, my queen was on a6. Why was my queen on a6? Yeah, my queen was on a6, and then he went rook f2. Sorry, my queen wasn't on f7, on a7. So in any case, after queen e4, which was his last mistake, I went knight b5. I should have gone knight a6, and this is a draw. For example, king e6 loses immediately to knight c5. King e8 loses immediately to queen a8 check, king d7, and knight c5. Okay, so he has to go king d6. He has to go king d6. Now I go queen b8 check. Now, if he goes to e6, then knight c5. If he goes to d7, then knight c5. So he has 2 moves, d5 and e5. Sorry, d5, only move. So king d5. And now I go queen b3 check. So king e5, I pick up the rook. King d6, I just repeat. What else? King here is illegal. King here, I think I just take on f7. Yeah, and this would have ended in a repetition. So king d6, queen b8 check, king d5, queen b3 check with a draw. If he ever blocks this way, then I just go knight c7 check. And he has to defend the queen. So let's say king here, and then rook g4. So that doesn't work. And if king c5, then knight e6. And again, he has to defend the queen. If here, then knight c7. A pretty hard drawing setup to see. But yeah, I didn't find it. So I lost the game, which was devastating. But yeah, it was a hard game to understand. And congratulations to Milan. And again, sorry for not recording sooner. But as I said, I had a lot of chess to play in the Croatian League and in the Zagreb Cup. So yeah, you will be seeing those games shortly. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.